Our Advent series has been around the places where these stories take place, where Jesus is coming into the world. The first week we talked about Rome and how it was a center of power, and how there are places in our life that represent power, that have power over us, and dictate things that happen that we don't have much control over. But then we also recognize that we also are places of power in the lives of people that are connected to us and around us. Last week we looked at Jerusalem and how Jerusalem was a center for religious expression, and how Jerusalem literally means city of peace, even though most of Jerusalem's existence has not been a peaceful one. And yet people continue to journey to Jerusalem because it is a holy place and a place where people have experienced God's grace and an understanding of God. This week we're looking at Nazareth, a city of simplicity. Could even call it a city, more like a town. That we're going to look at Nazareth and how God shows up to Mary there. And of course next week we will look at Bethlehem. Let's pray. O God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be pleasing in your sight. O Lord, our rock and our redeemer. Amen. Mary was from Nazareth. Mary is a common name. In fact, in the New Testament, there are 6 different Marys. Kind of like growing up as Sarah in the 90s. I was Sarah M. my whole life, Sarah M. Or maybe Brandon for boys in the 90s. There are variations of the name Mary. There's Marie, Miriam, Maureen, Maria, a lot of variations. And it has a few different meanings depending on which language you're reading the word in. Beloved, because Mary's told that she's highly favored by God, as Jama read. Rebellion, I like that one, because the Hebrew word mara actually means rebel, so perhaps rebellion is connected there, and they were thinking about their escape from slavery in Egypt. And then light giver is another name given to Mary, which makes sense when you think about Mary giving birth to Jesus, the light of the world. Now this gives me a chance to tell one of my favorite Christmas stories from my family. When Grace, some of you have heard this, our oldest was about 4 years old, she was pretty enamored with the story of Jesus' birth. Our church at the time had an annual nativity play, which was mostly staffed by toddlers and preschoolers, and she had participated in that every year. The first year, she was a sheep who could not walk. The second year, she was a sheep who walked and ran and refused to go up front. The third year, she was a cow who stood over the baby Jesus the whole time. And her fourth year, she was looking forward to the opportunity to be Mary, mother of Jesus. So she prepared. She played nativity nonstop. She played it with her little people that she had. She would load them up on her favorite bus because they were headed to the nativity. I mean, she was all about this. She would take her sister Allison and give her different roles, which Allison would put up with to some extent, but then go off and do it her own way. I know you're surprised. And then Elizabeth, she would try to convince to be the baby Jesus. But Elizabeth was a big enough baby that she could move around at that point and was also not following the rules for baby Jesus. Well, one day we get some Christmas presents in the mail because we had some family that was living across the country from us. Aunt Mary had sent some gifts for our girls. Mary is Daniel's twin sister. And so I was loading those gifts in the house and putting them under the tree. And of course, my 4 and 3-year-olds see these things. They get very excited and they run in and they're like, Mom, gifts under the tree. Now, side note, I have 4 gifts right now under my Christmas tree, but usually that all happens like right at Christmas. Like I'm not a pre-wrapper, early wrapper kind of mom. So for them to see presents being loaded under the tree is very exciting. So they come in there, they see these presents, they're like, Mom, where are these presents from? And I told them that Mary has sent us presents. Grace stops, grabs her chest, and says, Mary, the mother of God has sent me a gift? I felt really bad telling her it was just her Aunt Mary. Mary, the mother of God, was and is a big deal. Mary is a courageous rock star, a hero among our ancestors in the faith. But she didn't start out that way. You see, Mary was from an unknown town named Nazareth with a couple hundred people. We all know the name Nazareth now, but at that time, Nazareth was not close to anything. It was the sticks of the Hebrew world. It was a one-well town. The well is still there and named Mary's Well, but it's similar to being a one-light town. You blink and you miss it. Maybe for Greeneville, it's like saying Parrotsville. For us around here, we know what Parrotsville is, but anyone else, there is no hope for knowing what Parrotsville is. And the farther you get out, the more specific you have to be with people. If you ever go somewhere other than this area and you say, I'm from Greeneville, they'll say, and where is that? So you instead say Knoxville, or maybe you say the Tri-Cities. You don't even name one of those because people recognize the Tri-Cities and Knoxville. And if they don't recognize those, you can say where UT is. And then you're like, yeah, I'm an hour and 20 minutes away from there, right? Mary is from a one-well town. If you blink, you'll miss it. Now, as a resident of Nazareth, we know about Mary that she is engaged to Joseph. This gives us a clue that Mary is a tween. Do we have any 12 to 15-year-olds in the room? I know we do. Wave at me. Several 12 to 15-year-olds in the room. Okay. Well, I'm talking about you. This is your age bracket of people. Mary is somewhere in that 12 to 15-year-old age bracket. She's Middle Eastern. She's Jewish. She's poor. She's probably illiterate. She was an ordinary citizen of her time right there in Nazareth. Now, a person's beginning place is not usually a good predictor for what is possible for that person. Maybe that's true for you. Maybe you started your life out in not so great a place. Maybe with not so great a family. Maybe with not so great a situation. But God has brought you through in a way that surprised those who knew you at your start. It actually makes me think of the Mississippi River. Now stay with me. Last summer, we went to the Mississippi River, and then we went up into St. Louis. We were in Memphis and then up in St. Louis, and you are around the mighty Mississippi a good bit on that kind of journey. So as I was sitting in the car, getting bored with whatever was happening, I began to read about the Mississippi River, and I thought it was random at the time, but when I thought of this last night as I was preparing for this sermon, I thought, oh Lord, that is why you read about the Mississippi River. I learned that the Mississippi River is 2,300 miles long. It travels through 10 states. At its widest, it is 11 miles wide. I almost said long. The place where it starts is in Minnesota. Has anyone been to the headwaters of the Mississippi? Okay, you know what I'm about to say. At the headwaters, it is only a few feet wide, and it is about ankle deep. You can step across the mighty Mississippi at its beginning. And if you can't step across it or jump across it, you can walk through it pretty safely and get to the other side. The mighty Mississippi, y'all. What appears insignificant at its beginning becomes the most important waterway in our country. Where something or a person begins isn't always a good predictor for where they will end up, especially when you put God in the mix. You see, Mary was a poor teenage girl at the bottom of every social rung that she could be a part of, living in a town that no one cared enough to even put down on the common maps of the time. In fact, one of the most famous early Jewish historians, Josephus, he wrote in the 1st century, and he has a lot of information that we use to compare to the scriptures and kind of find what is in there that is historical and factual. Well, Josephus named about 40 little tiny towns up in Galilee and did not even name Nazareth. Nazareth is a no-name place. But God knew where Nazareth was, and God knew who Mary was, and God saw Mary. God went to her town and called her blessed, favored. The best translation is actually grace-filled, because Mary doesn't do anything to earn God's attention except exist. Just like you and me. She is beloved because she exists, because she is a beloved child of God. Now, what makes her a courageous rock star and hero in our faith comes next. It's her response. Last week, you'll remember that the angel Gabriel visits an older man. I actually looked up his age because I worried that maybe older was 40s in the Bible, and that's where I am. So I looked that up, and we don't know how old Zachariah and Elizabeth are. In fact, some scholars say 50s, some say 60s, some say 70s, 80s. We'll just put it way, way out there. It's none of us. Way older than any of us in this room, right? So we have this older man that the angel Gabriel goes to. This man who is a priest, who is gone into the holiest of holies and is surprised to find that someone else is there, the angel Gabriel. He's surprised that when he goes in the Holy of Holies, that someone that represents God is there. How ironic and funny is that? So here we have Zechariah, and this week, that same angel Gabriel, 6 months later, visits a young woman in an ordinary place. And most scholars agree it was likely at a well where she was visited. She was doing an ordinary daily chore. She was gathering water. Now, this tells us, good Bible scholars, that participating in God's kingdom is for all people. The super religious like Zechariah, the everyday like Mary, the old, the young, everyone in between, men and women, everyone in between. No one is left out. No one earns their place. We're all invited to say yes, to be a part of smuggling God's love into the world. We're all invited to be a part of holy mischief. We're all invited to build up God's kingdom, to contribute one way or another. Mary is a rock star and a hero of our faith because she says yes. She's not coerced. Her arm is not twisted. She is invited and she says yes. She didn't have time to think about the consequences of saying yes to this invitation. It simply felt like the right thing to do. And so she, an unmarried young woman with little power and hardly anything to her name at all, says yes to bringing the Christ child into the world. Nazareth is the place where God's love becomes specific. We call this in the church the incarnation, which is the place where the infinite God becomes finite, where ultimate strength chooses vulnerability. Nazareth was a place where God could be heard because it was a place of simplicity, of slowing down, of rest and rhythm of life. Now, if you've done any study of scriptures and the laws, you know that to be an unmarried woman who is found to be with child is often a death sentence. I wondered as I was reading about Nazareth if that's part of the beauty of choosing a small town, because oftentimes when it's our own kid, when it's our own cousin, our own niece, our own nephew, our own grandchild, the things that other people have said, or maybe that we've even said we'd always do, no longer fit in the face of that child and that loved one. I wonder if that's part of the protection that Mary is given, is that she would have been a child of that town. Everybody knew Mary. Everybody loved Mary. And even if they didn't believe what Mary said happened to her, they were not going to let anyone harm this girl that they had raised. Wow. God chose Nazareth. God chose Mary. Mary and Nazareth to be the place where God's love becomes real. God can be heard in that place because of the simplicity. Maybe even because of the slowing down. Maybe even because it's in a small town where relationships are valued above everything else. Maybe that's why God was able to inbreak into the world, into that place. We don't know. We can only wonder at what God is up to. Friends, there is no place where we can find ourselves where God will not and cannot show up. What starts as a trickle at the headwaters of the mighty Mississippi becomes a torrent quickly. What starts as a normal day for a young teenage girl becomes the day when God speaks to her and calls her to be one of the most important moments and people in the history of Christianity, as she is the mother of Jesus, ushering him physically into the world. One interaction in our lives can make a huge difference, or can make a huge difference in the life of a person that you touch. There's actually a trend going around on social media. I assume it begins at TikTok, but it gets to me at Instagram, which means it's super late. So those of you that are on the latest, I'm sorry, but this trend has made it to me. And in this trend, what people are reflecting on is insignificant moments in their life that became significant. Like when you meet that boy or girl at college, the reflection is go on the first date because they're the one. Or when you get that postcard in the mail about that random school, check it out because that is where you make the connections you need to make for your future. Or when that teacher tells you to consider that you're really good at X, Y, or Z, listen to them. Or when you almost gave up that instrument or that sport or that extracurricular activity that you love, know that something else is coming your way and that experience won't be wasted because it will bless you in the midst of the new experience that you face. Or that time when you're asked to do something you've never done before, to say yes and discover that it's your passion. Or maybe it's that divorce or that getting fired or that failing at something that finally becomes a beginning point for something greater than you never thought possible. There is no place, no situation, no person where God will not show up. God seeks us out. God is with us. God invites us to live our lives without fear and with the abundance of God's love and grace in the midst of it. And that doesn't mean it's going to be easy, right? There are a lot of hardships in the midst of life and a lot of hard things that we go through. And my goodness, look at Mary. She simply said yes because in the moment, it was the right thing. She didn't think about all the consequences that may come as a result or how everything was going to work out. She said yes because God called her, and she trusted that God would equip her, that her availability was what God needed, and that the rest would work itself out. So this morning, as you think about your own life, those insignificant moments that you kind of point to now as moments where something significant came from them, I also want you to think about maybe moments where other people have reflected to you that you did something in their life that you didn't think that much of in the moment, but it made all the difference for them. I want to invite you to be open to listening for where God is with you now. What is that place or that situation or that person that you've kind of walled off to say, nope, God's not there. We're just going to pass by that closet that I've stuffed all the things in. Open it up. There is nowhere that God cannot touch. There is no situation that God cannot show up in. There is no person who has become so unworthy that God would not call you. If you don't believe me, you can read it in the scriptures. You can see all the places that people thought they were far from God and God found them. In prison, in a place where they said, I'm not holy enough, and God said, forget about holy enough. In exile, because they have done something horrible and they've gone away from their family. God has found people, and God will continue to find people, and God has found and called you. You are not an accident. Your life is not a big accident. God is at work.